I hit rock bottom whilst I still had the business. A big drinker, used to take drugs a lot. I was partying 4, maybe 5 nights a week. Had terrible insomnia. I wasn't present, I was gone. That was probably like the last 4 or 5 years of when I had the business, yeah.
I think your story is quite interesting and can be very inspiring for a lot of people, especially people which are on the entrepreneur journey. So can you maybe start with tell me a bit more how everything started?
Didn't really pay much attention at school for anything. I just used to use it as like a socializing event. And then when I was like 14, 15, the school kind of noticed that I wasn't really paying any attention. They actually allowed me to go on work experience, which lasted for the last year of school. So I was basically doing a couple of days a week of not going to school, but just going to work. And then it's kind of when I got introduced to my father, because my father wasn't really around, but he had a scrapyard. And then...
So what work was that, sorry?
A scrapyard.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I kind of leveraged that kind of opportunity to maybe start making money for myself quite early. He had a yard, that he used to get in cars for engine jobs and stuff, and then never used to really do much with the rest of the car parts. He used to just weigh them in. So I set up, and he wasn't familiar with the internet and stuff, or eBay. So I basically just started selling the parts off the cars from I'd probably been 16, 17 at that point. And yeah, I just kind of started
selling pieces of cars,
the parts
on eBay, right? Using
on eBay,
the beginning of eBay.
Yeah. I just started doing really well, really quickly. It was turning over quite good money, and then
How to go back to school after that?
Pardon?
How to go back to school after?
Yeah, I kind of left by the time it kicked off.
Okay.
School was quite irrelevant for me, to be honest. I didn't pay much attention or went to the best school or anything, so I wasn't really gaining anything from it. So I kind of stepped away, probably left 3-4 months before it finished anyway. I don't think I even sat any of my GCSEs. But then just kind of started doing that with Dad. Did that for maybe till I was about 19, I think, and then so it had been a couple of years.
And then you got into fashion?
No. Then I came out to Ibiza and started doing some seasons.
Okay.
Where I could coincidentally work remotely from. So, back then I would have been, that would have been 15, 16 years ago. I was working remotely then. I was getting people to ship the parts, and it was great. That kind of changed my whole perspective of things. And then I kind of realized I didn't really want to do that anymore. It wasn't really, I didn't want to go every time. I was in the seasons of Ibiza, which I was loving, but then I was coming back to Norfolk for the winters, which was
don't want to be there.
Sucked, yeah. So I just wanted to do something that would get me maybe to London, and we'd met a lot of DJs from being in Ibiza doing the seasons.
So you got the Ibiza London connection.
I had friends in London who were, running parties as well, and in East London it had been Dalston, Shoreditch, kind of Hackney, basically. I just knew if I could come up with something. This was the early days of Instagram as well. I just knew if I could come up with a product, didn't know what it was at the time, I could seed it and retarget back on Instagram, because it was quite easy back then. You could get these bots that you could retarget. It's basically free marketing, basically, and it was so powerful. So I figured that out, and then it was coming up with a product, what it was going to be, what would sell, and then someone had.
So you had the system, but you didn't have the product yet. You know
Didn't
exactly
I knew how to
but you didn't know what you're gonna sell.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly. Okay. So, and then clothing kind of obviously the other thing I always used to do, it's the only thing I was good at school was art and creative work. So
drawing, painting.
Yeah, that was the only thing I kind of stuck at. So it kind of made sense that I'd probably go to something a bit more creative, especially that I'd come from being on a bloody scrapyard. And we lent into clothing because my friend was graphic designer. He was in Dalston, which was quite cool anyway. It was quite easy to maybe leverage that coolness to maybe go into a clothing brand. So we kind of did. And then I literally just came up with a name. We spent time trying to come up with a name. I came up with a name eventually, and it was called NICCE, which was an elaborated version.
NICCE.
NICCE, yeah, that's how you pronounce it, but it started off as nice because it was just an elaborated spelling of how you would say nice. We called it nice for years, but after a while we was like, I don't really like the sound of that anymore. Yeah, I was.
So that's the brand.
The brand was NICCE, yeah, and it wasn't really. I wasn't really doing it. It wasn't my passion as such. It wasn't really a brand that I was doing to be cool for me to wear. It was like, I mean, I come from nothing. I never went on holiday as a kid. I was like, I just wanted some money so I could not live the life I lived when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to have certain things and aspiration. And we just gave it to the DJs that we met in Ibiza. We started running nights in London, which we'd promote the clothing for as well. And it just kicked off really quickly. And then.
So how old are you when you start? Sorry,
21.
21.
Yeah.
And then you got really successful. Or you got like around what age?
Yeah, I mean,
how many years it took to get to this?
I mean, I think first year we did like 300,000. I think our second year we did close to $1 million turnover.
Wow, it's really quick.
Yeah, it went so quick.
How come? You know?
Online was booming, and then the wholesalers, the big retail accounts in the UK were just knocking on our door. And for me, it was like, I just wanted to maximize the revenue and opportunity. So I was saying yes to a lot of the accounts. You know, we're talking the Top Mans and the ASOS's and the JD Sports and which are, you know, huge in the UK.
But I can imagine there is just so many brands and people trying to start brands.
Yeah.
Do you know why they picked you?
I think
what was it?
We were something different at the time. We were very clean. It was like non-offensive. Like it was just a clean, looked very premium. And I think because we got the right people wearing it.
Marketing, right?
Marketing, of course. We had all the DJs wearing it that I'd met doing seasons. It was just, and it was flying on our own website. It was kind of like a no-brainer for them to give it. I mean, they didn't all take it once. Like Top Man was the first, and then it came up. We actually became the fastest and biggest brand in Top Man history. We were selling more floor space per floor space than what they could sell their own product. So the company grew quickly. I think I had that business for 10 years. I got it up to about 35 million euros.
Revenue.
Yeah, we had about 105 staff. But it was tough, you know. I had no experience, so I learned everything from trial and error and scrap. Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I
understand.
I knew nothing about fashion, apparel, production, logistics, operations. I knew nothing. So everything I kind of learned and failed, learned again, tried again, made it work, made mistakes, and just kept going. I think it wasn't until probably the third year of the business that we actually got someone in the business who had a
business experience
and apparel experience as well. Yeah, it might have been the third year.
Because you started the business with friends, right?
Yes.
Which people like just close to you with no real like.
Yeah, I just hired all my
skills.
friends initially.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
How did that go?
Yeah, I mean, it served a purpose at the time. It obviously wasn't the right or long-term solution, but it got us along, definitely.
Because you could like, maybe you didn't have the perfect professional in this position, but you had support, emotional support, and people that you knew that you could trust.
Yeah, exactly.
That you could work together. I think it's someone even more powerful than having skills.
And I was just so stressed at the time. I was just leveraging who I could get access to instantly to just help.
Just needed help.
I just needed help. I just needed hands and brains, you know, and people supported pretty quickly. So it was good, but it was it was a very, very stressful period in my life, which and I mean, it didn't really stop the stress, but it kind of like, as the brand got bigger, there was different stresses, of course. Yeah.
I'd love to get into that.
Yeah.
But right now, are you hungry? Maybe.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
I had to do some study for your menu, because you told me something about Lobster Thermidor, which is something I've only heard of before.
Oh, really?
I've never cooked it. I didn't even know what it was.
Really?
Yeah. So I had to just do some research, and I didn't like the actual traditional way.
Is it not French?
It is.
Yeah, yeah.
It is just so many recipes that.
Yeah.
So I didn't really like the traditional way to cook it. So I've thought about it and I've made my version. I hope you like it.
Amazing. I'm sure I will, man.
Go. Lobster Thermidor.
Wow.
All right. Enjoy, my friend. Help yourself. This is some lemon to add some acidity. And if you want a bit of, let's say, spiciness, peppery flavor, just eat this flour.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a nice
sprinkle
flour.
it on.
Yeah, enjoy, man. And do some Pomme Paille, fried chips.
Nice.
You can choose your chopsticks, choose your cutlery.
I might go.
Enjoy.
No more, to be honest.
Enjoy.
Thank you very much. Oh, wow.
How is that?
So good. Beautiful.
So now that we know a bit more about the journey, how you got to this place, success, whatever, how does it look like? Once you are there, once you have this company who's successful, you make a lot of money. I mean, that's pretty much what everybody's looking for, right? But what is the reality of it?
Yeah. I think for me, because again, I came from nothing and everything was trial and error, I didn't really have much advisors on certain things. It was all like learn. And again, yeah, I managed to get the advisors in the business about how to grow, but I wasn't really ever advised like how to like handle the money or like process it or deal with like what's going on.
More your relationship with money,
relationship with money, and like to be honest, I was quite oblivious to like how much I was worth or how much the business was worth, because I owned 100% of the business. So it was like you
had no partners.
No.
Oh wow. Okay.
No, I had people who had shares at the end. Yeah. Well, sorry, about halfway through they issued shares, like options, not shares. Sorry, but I owned 100% of the business, so which led to me having 100% of the decisions, which, early 20s with lots of employees and big turnovers, it probably isn't the smartest of decisions. Not something I'd definitely do again, because depending on my mood, I could change my mind, I could do this, I could do that. But yeah, the money thing, again, I was oblivious to like it. I wasn't, because I'm not really like that material. It wasn't like I've never owned. I don't get watches. I don't own that many material things. Wasn't really going to clubs and getting tables. I wasn't buying watches. I didn't really even have a car until like maybe 6 years in. That's when I kind of like bought like a nice car, and I'd always done property. So on the side of everything,
So what do you do with all this money once? Once you get there, like
I was just so. Eventually, I just started buying property. So
Okay, so directly you start to invest. You never been into a phase where I'm gonna just burn my money, like do whatever I want, buy everything.
No, I never. All I did was invest the money. So when I had the business, with the money I was taking out, I bought up to like 12 properties. I had like 3 in London and various in back where I was from, and then I bought my place in Ibiza as well. So that's all I was doing with the money whilst I still owned the business. Yeah, I was just moving it away, because I didn't have any desire to have anything material, so I had to do something with it. Initially, I wasn't even paying myself a salary. I was just reinvesting it. And then like some of the advisors we were getting saying like, look, you need to pay yourself something, Christ. And then I started taking good salaries, because what's the point,
I think that's it. I think this is such an important point, and that's what I can imagine like most people who get to a point where they receive a lot of money and stuff. I mean, most people wants to spend it, and I see. Yeah.
Well, I used to only really like spending my money on experience, and that would just be from traveling.
Yeah.
But it was kind of through work anyway. But yeah, I would just be be traveling a lot. Because we had quite a lot of staffs, and I was 100% owner. I kind of stepped away quite after about 5-6 years, I'd kind of like left them to it, should we say? Because I wasn't like, I didn't have that much passion for the brand. I never wore the brand. I never really.
You just loved the game, loved the
I just-
business, loved being there? Or
Well, at that time, I was probably.
you need to love something to put that much energy into it,
I
right?
think I just liked something to do at that stage. And also at the time, I was a big drinker, so take drugs a lot. I was partying 4, maybe 5 nights a week. Had terrible insomnia. I was like a bit of a, I was like, I wasn't present. I was gone for like, and that probably lasted for like, that was probably like the last 4 or 5 years of when I had the business, yeah. So that was tough.
Do you think like all this, the business, the parties, all that was just you like trying to get away from something?
Yeah,
or-
I think it was just handling
losing
the
yourself
stress
into
and the
work.
pressure of the
Yeah,
business.
so it's like kind of a vicious circle, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. Basically, I used to go out on a Wednesday and I'd drink until Sunday just so I'd have a good night's sleep on the Sunday. And I'd sleep maybe 1 day a week and I would have insomnia. I had insomnia definitely seriously for 2 years.
And how can you take smart decisions? How can you run a company that big?
I started making terrible decisions at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, I was making very bad decisions and very hostile, very argumentative. Like, I was all over the place.
Horrible boss.
Yes, definitely. But I used to also like, it wasn't horrible to everyone. It was like maybe just like the other directors or whatever. And I'd just be like mind changing. And then I'd like, then I just used to kind of.
Unbalanced, no clarity. You don't know what's going on.
And then like, I think I stepped away completely. Like, I kind of had like maybe 18 months out the business where I just didn't even really go into the office. But probably also that wasn't a good thing either because then I had no purpose. So that was probably equally as bad for me, yeah. And I just didn't know what to do at that point. I had no clue. When I've had a business for that long with that much passion, it's probably a time that when you should sell the business. Obviously, I did sell the business eventually, but when it came to that kind of cross point of like the desire, the love's not there, and like I don't really know what I'm doing. On my next businesses, obviously I have an exit plan. I know I'm going to exit, but when I was mid-20s, I didn't really know what I was doing. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. The next dish I'm going to cook for you, it's a traditional dish from Sichuan. It's a Mapo tofu,
What's that, sorry?
Mapo tofu,
Okay. No.
right? So it's a dish of tofu with a pork and Sichuan pepper sauce.
Nice.
And that, I love that. It's just so.
What's this?
That's Sichuan pepper. Just smell it.
Yeah, I know this.
All right, let's do it. Ready?
Wow. Feast.
Rice.
All for me.
All for you, my friend.
Wow.
So yeah, Mapo tofu.
Yeah.
Some rice in. This is only fuel.
Jesus.
Like it?
You took us on the journey, where you come from, what you've learned, all the challenges coming with success. So basically, like now that you had this trajectory, like how do you look back at it? What did you learn? Like what happened then? Once you realized that you were probably not doing it the right way, in a way.
Yeah, I was kind of like rock bottom at one point. I was very, very emotionally depressed, even though I had like a serious amount of money that I couldn't even think of how to spend it all.
That was while you were in the business,
Whilst
before
had
you
the
sold,
business.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I hit rock bottom whilst I still had the business. And then obviously the pandemic came. Business doing well, it was probably the best time to sell. And then I think prior to that, I started doing a little bit of doing quite a bit of therapy and coaching, and I'd met some coach. We were chatting, and he was like, on one of the, because obviously of like how low I was, he was like, what would make you happy? I was like, well, I hate it. I never really actually loved being in London. I hated where I lived in East London. I just didn't. I never felt at home. It never felt like me. I had I had good friends, and I was always out and I was social, but I just never felt at home. And then I was just on the call one day, and he was like, I was just like, man, I just bought a massive house, 4-story house in Hackney to myself. You know, it was a big house, I was living on my own. And I was like, I'm just throwing money at it, and I'm like chatting to him. I'm like, this is just
Makes no sense.
this is not making me. I'm just putting money into this house. It's just making me more miserable. Funny enough, my girlfriend at the time had a little barge boat.
Oh, what?
A barge boat, a boat like
What's that?
a little boat like on the canal.
Ah, okay, okay.
Tiny little boat.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, this corridor size.
Okay.
I went from my big house in Hackney to sleeping on her boat, and then started having like the best night's sleep. And I was just like, fuck, like, this is ridiculous. How am I way happier and sleeping way better on a tiny little canal boat compared to, and it just kind of put things in perspective. And then at the time I was going through this coaching, he was like, what do you want? And I was like, well, you know, I'm fed up with the weather of UK. I'm fed up with not having any greenery in Hackney and like nature. And I was like, I just want sun, sea and mountains. And he was like, well, why aren't you doing that? Why are you not living like that? And then I don't know.
Because you're cool.
Because I could, yeah, exactly. I could do what I want. And I don't know, some saying that just so simply was like kind of a bit of a turning stone for me, because I was like just really uncomfortable with my environment and myself. So I was like, for me, I wanted to get my environment settled before I could start making the inner changes within myself. So just ended up going back out to Ibiza. It was like 2021, still half COVID. I rented a place for 3 months. Within like,
It's not just like, if I think about it, if I think about it, moving to Ibiza, like coming from like a dark place, addiction and party and stuff,
Yeah.
that was not maybe the smartest move, at least.
no, but I was.
Why did you decide to
Because
go
at that
back?
point I was that depressed I wasn't going out anymore.
Ah, okay,
I
you're
was
good.
not
You're
leaving
good.
the house. I was
Okay.
not drinking. I didn't
Just
drink
in the
like-
dark.
No, I was in the dark, and I was like, and I was on the plane out of Flirt. I met my own. My friend was rented a nice place. My friend was going to come stay with me, who was fortunately a life coach and trainer, and he stayed with me for 3 months. And I remember just flying in and like just landing, and instantly I was started to feel better. You know, within a month I was kind of like near enough back to myself. Obviously, I still had the business, still had the burden of returning back to the UK. So I was just like, look, I know that last time I felt this happy is when I did Seasons 11 years prior to that. And I was like, this place is the only place that really makes me feel at home and happy. So I was like, I'm going to buy a place, because if I don't buy a place, then probably I'll come up with bullshit reasons why I can't return again. So if I buy a place, I'll have to come back.
Yeah, commit.
So searched for a villa, found a beautiful home here, bought it, and back to London, got sucked back in again, bought a house and didn't even come to it didn't even see it after 6 months after I bought it, because I just got sucked into London, which is crazy if you think about it. And then so then I sold the business.
What year did you sell the business?
That was about 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
3 years ago, yeah.
How did you feel when you just signed a contract, done?
Oh man, it was like, it's just so ready to get rid of it. Yeah, very relieved. But then as soon as I kind of sold it, that's when I really started to do the work on myself, continue the coaching, start getting more into my training, routine, structure, building a home, having a home, feeling content.
How do you feel now?
Oh man, like $1 million compared to the best I've ever felt.
And how does your life look like now compared to before?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Like, I just invest in projects that I have passion for, I can slightly advise on. And my day no longer starts about waking up and thinking about business. You know, I typically can go till 11 o'clock before I even look at my phone now. That's just kind of like the non-negotiables I've kind of put in.
I love that.
I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some days, of course, if stuff needs doing, I'll do it. But I just put life before work now. I kind of wake up with me, my intentions are me before anything else. And, you know, having that in place was, you know, fundamental to a lot of change I've made. Yeah.
Spend a lot of time in nature.
Yeah.
Take your time, go with the flow.
Exactly. I'm loads of, you know, when it's warm, I'm going to get a wetsuit soon, but I'm swimming probably 5-6 times a week. So I'm training most days. I mean, you know, we have fortunate to have beautiful hikes here, which we're, you know, going on maybe. I used to do it a lot more, but maybe now like once a week.
Take care of your body, take care of your mind. All comes together, right?
Yeah,
We know that.
and
right?
then, you know, I'm reading lots of books, of course, about bettering myself, and not doing so much coaching anymore. Just so I feel like I'm in such a good place, and I kind of have a lot of the tools now that that have got me to where I am. I'm you know, the tools are there if I need them, but I'm, you know, very content how I am now.
I have a question. Everybody knows money doesn't make you happy, right?
No, of course, yeah.
But why is everybody going for the money still, knowing that? But why do you believe that? Do you think we have to experience the fact that it doesn't make us happy to understand, to actually
100%.
live that?
Yeah, 100%. You need to go out and buy that house and spend all that money on it. You need to go buy that crazy car. I mean, I've done all those mistakes, and I tell everyone who's become into positions that I have or other what not to do, and no
They've
matter what,
done
they
it.
have to do it themselves. They
Yeah.
have to.
It's like conceptual learning
definitely.
and experiential learning,
Yeah.
right?
And some people do like that. Some people do like the material things, and that's, I mean, deep down, if they like them, I don't know, but they think they like them or need self-validation, or, I mean, I just don't really need those things. I mean, obviously, I have a nice house, of course, but
Yeah, a pretty simple guy.
but yeah, I am. But I think I also, you know, I'm still investing. I'm still doing stuff. You know, I don't have to do any of these things, but I still do because I have experience, and I like to invest in the projects that I believe in, and I think they're doing good, and
Yeah, it's what you do.
that I can help, and I think will make other people's lives better. So that's kind of like,
Philanthropic part of your life, right?
yeah. I mean, I'm still making money from it, and
Yeah,
growing it,
yeah.
of course. But they're like,
Trying to look
they're
at the
more
why.
passion projects. You know, I had a business for, one of the things I would say is, so I had a business for 10 years and I didn't love the brand, and that was like probably detriment to my mental well-being as well, as doing something for so long, which your only driver is money, with not passion. I think it's a recipe for disaster, because it becomes, you know, soulless, I suppose, at the end.
If by any chance there is like a young entrepreneur or just an entrepreneur who's watching that, what would you tell them? What would you like, a few
Yeah.
things that the most important thing for you?
I always think what people don't take advantage is, obviously a lot of people end up going to university and spending lots of money on education. The best time, which I did, to start a business is when you're living in your parents. If you're lucky, fortunate enough to be able to live with your parents, it's to start a business whilst living at your parents, when you've got very little overheads. Like, it's like
No spending.
you've got no excuse. That is when you should be starting businesses and trialing error as much because you've
Because
got no
everything
risk.
you earn, you can basically reinvest directly.
Exactly. And
in
you've got
yourself.
no risk. You haven't got a mortgage to pay. You haven't got rents to pay. You know, if your parents are looking after you, you've got no outcomes, and you know they can support your growth. And I think when you're younger, when you've like, I suppose you're more naive, aren't you? You know, you can.
Yeah. The better time to start was yesterday, right? And how about someone a bit further in the journey? Something a bit more technical.
What's
like
that?
someone a bit more further in the entrepreneur journey, you know?
Has it
Someone
started their entrepreneur journey?
Yeah, or they're in there and they're struggling, or maybe they have, you know, they are challenged in the same way you've been challenged, you know, with this, I don't know, passion.
Yeah, I mean, I was always quite. I'd like, well, maybe not always, but I think it's, you know, should never be. Try and lose your ego in terms of always listen to what other people have to say, and the advice is, you know, always just listen. You should definitely always listen more than you talk. Something I learned, I think, quite young, luckily. You know, the people who just talk too much, I don't see them progress as far, just because I think if you talk, how are you learning if you're talking all the time? You just got to listen and listen and listen. And some of it might be wrong, some of it might be right, but the more you listen, the more you learn, I think. And that would probably be one of the key things I'd say to a lot of people. Yeah.
I think the fear of failure, it's something massive.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
again, if you're living
on the
at home
past.
with your, I suppose we're talking about that person, you get
Yeah.
older, aren't we? The fear of failure. I mean, fucking hell, like what have you, I mean,
What
you
would you
rather
say some
fail,
days you like?
Would you rather fail, or would you rather get to 40 and not try it? I mean,
I'd rather
or 50
fail.
or 60
Yeah.
and not try all those
I
things.
think I realized that, like, recently I was thinking about this whole failure thing, and there's this sentence that came to me, which is like, I'd rather fail at a life I've decided to live than succeed at a life someone decided for me, kind of, you know? So it's like, I'd rather really struggle, but make sure I'm choosing the direction I'm going, than just set up for something which might be easier on the day-to-day. I'm not really sure why I'm doing that. I'm like, you know, what's coming after? It's just...
Well, I think people need.
But you need strong intention. You need to really have so much faith in yourself and the future, the universe, if you want to be able to.
I think I'm quite addicted to learning, because I like. For me, when I make mistakes, I learn more. So I think to give advice to someone, if you can really channel to start learning, like in whatever it is, like when you start making that, you have to try and learn something to make the mistake, right?
Totally.
And then you'll learn even more. Also, you have to make the mistake to learn more. But
yeah, I think it's a great point. Thank you so much, man. I have so you told me that your favorite dessert when you were a child was the Eton mess, right? And now you told me that your new favorite dessert is the Basque cheesecake. So I've decided today for you to make a combination of the two.
No
right?
way.
So
Wow.
we'll see how it goes. Should be good.
Beautiful.
Mitch, it was a pleasure to have you today, cook for you. I really appreciate you being here and opening up, sharing your story. So thank you very much for that, man. And I'll see you around. I'm so happy I'm giving Spanish lesson to someone now. Like a year ago, that was me. Like couldn't speak.
Buen trabajo.
Trabajo.
Yeah.
You're an animal.
So I just get messy.
Mitch, thank you so much again for coming. And I will see you soon. Why I want to say that? It makes no sense to say that. But I'm saying it, but I don't want to say it.